بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, last week we started hadith number 1, but we only took a few introductory points regarding hadith number 1. So therefore there's no need to listen to the memorization again because the students have already recited it. But as for some of the points that we took, quickly just revise some of those points. Inshallah. So we took the introduction of Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah. Then after that, hadith number 1, Kabirul. Who is it narrated by? Which books?
Hadith number 1.
Hadith number
Bukhari and Muslim.
Bukhari and Muslim. Riyadh. Which hadith number in Bukhari? First one. It's easy. I'm not going to normally ask you hadith numbers, but that's first one, so that's easy. Is it the exact wording of the first hadith? It's slightly differs. Qasim, actually, I'll keep this an open question. Anyone memorize the chain?
الحميد عبد الله بن الزبير قال حدثنا سفيان بن عيينة قال حدثنا يحيى بن سعيد الأنصاري قال أخبرني محمد بن إبراهيم التيمي أنه سمع علقمة ابن وقاص الليثي يقول سمعت عمرو بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه على المنبر قال سمعت رسول الله.
The rest of the hadith, mashallah, ahsan. Last week the worksheets that you got, there's a slight mistake in the chain, so just change it. Okay, I did update it and I sent it in the group, but the chain, the Prophet ﷺ, Umar ibn Khattab, Alqamah, then you guys had Yahya, right? In between there should be another person. In between there, the name which is missing, Muhammad ibn Ibrahim at-Taymi. Add that in. Muhammad ibn Ibrahim at-Taymi. So after Alqamah, there should be another name which is Muhammad ibn Ibrahim at-Taymi. And then Yahya ibn Sa'id. Okay. Qasim, what is Khabar Ahad? Okay. Then if you say that, you have to define mutawatir. Must be translated. So Khabar Ahad, they normally translate as singular narrations or something like that. No. Okay, Adam, are these Khabar Ahad, are they proofs?
Yeah.
So if there's a hadith, only one companion narrated it, one tabi'i narrated it, and so on.
Examples I gave last week was when people went out to fight, small groups said
Good. One of the adillah is the Prophet when he commanded the people to fight, he said that a group of people should remain behind to learn the religion, to teach it to the people, and that shows that it's not a great number. Next to you. Did you first listen? Okay. I'll give you another proof showing that Khabar Ahad is a dalil. No? Was it? Sorry? A proof that Khabar Ahad are proofs.
What is the story about Sahaba going to a different country?
Very good. When the Prophet will send Sahaba to other countries, he will send them individuals, Mu'adh radiallahu anhu to one side of Yemen, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu anhu to the other side of Yemen, and to teach the whole religion, not just to narrate one hadith, but to teach the whole religion. If we had to have a great number of people, then the Prophet would have sent a great number of people. And we also mentioned the Prophet himself is a singular person, likewise other prophets and messengers, and so on. Okay. The meaning of this hadith is specific to just this hadith or can be found in other places.
I mean, there's more.
The general meaning of the hadith. Yes, while it's widespread in the Quran and Sunnah. There's many ahadith, many ayat that talk about and the meaning of this hadith. It might not be the exact same wording, But the general meaning, like every action needs to have an intention and needs to be done sincerely for Allah for it to be accepted and so on. The hadith and ayat are many. Right? Give me one statement regarding the status of this hadith.
Is it when Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that whoever among you is from me and
That's a virtue of hadith generally. I'm talking about this hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Give me one statement of the scholars showing the importance of this hadith.
Rahman al-Mahdi, he said, if I authored a book, then I
Oh, good.
would
Abdurrahman Mahdi said if I was to order a book or author a book, I'd put this hadith in the beginning of every single chapter. Imam?
this hadith 1/3 of Islam and into 70 chapters.
Good. Imam Shafi'i said this hadith is a third of knowledge and enters into 70 chapters of fiqh. Right. Tawheed, why was this hadith narrated? Regarding who?
But you said, you mentioned that it wasn't, it's the stories that cleansing for satisfaction.
Okay. What did you say?
Disagree with him that you mentioned the story, but
What's the story?
that someone went for marriage, something, but it wasn't linked to this hadith.
Good. So there's a person, he's known as Muhajir Qais. Muhajir, i.e. the one who did hijrah. Qais was the woman that he traveled for. So he migrated, but not for the same reason that the Muslims migrated. He migrated for marriage. We said this hadith, many ulama have rejected it. However, the story. However, as Ibn Hajar and others have mentioned, that when they reject it, they're not rejecting the authenticity of the story itself. The story took place. But what they are rejecting is the link between the story and this hadith. And the Prophet did not say this hadith due to that story, even though there's a link in terms of the meaning. There are two separate instances. Good. Okay, then we stopped here and we were at Gharib al-Hadith, so we'll continue from here, inshallah. Now, Gharib al-Hadith is a very important science from the sciences of hadith. Gharib al-Hadith is referring to the hard or the difficult words as I mentioned in hadith, right? And that's why you'll find books written on this topic. And from the most famous books is An-Nihaya fi Gharib al-Hadith, I think it's called. An-Nihaya fi Gharib al-Hadith by, I think it's Ibn al-Athir. And basically what this book is basically a dictionary for hadith. It's basically a dictionary for hadith. Any difficult word that you come across in hadith, you want to know what the meaning of the word is, you just go to that book and explain. Right? Now obviously when we translate it into English, the importance of this science is kind of lost, because even if the word is one of the most difficult and rarest words in Arabic, the translation is going to use an easy word that everyone understands anyway. So in English you might think, oh, we don't need it, but the reality is that when you're studying a book in English, in Arabic, you need it without a doubt. And the person who is translating the hadith, he has to know what it means in Arabic before he translates it. And then once it's translated, if it's translated correctly, then alhamdulillah. So there are a few words here, and I put these words here because some of the references that I was using mentioned these words. But obviously for an English-speaking audience, they're not as important. But maybe if somebody's memorizing hadith and he wants to know what the Arabic words mean, then it could benefit him. So the first word it says here, Al-A'mal. Al-A'mal are basically actions. Yeah, إنما الأعمال. So A'mal is actions, but we're going to talk in a bit more detail exactly what type of actions is this hadith referring to in a short while, inshallah. Then it says An-Niyyah. Now An-Niyyah, again, we're going to go into detail regarding its meaning, but Niyyah is intention. Niyyah is intention. That's a very important word for everyone to know, because it's a word that many times will be mentioned, but may not necessarily have its translation mentioned with it. So somebody might be giving a speech or a lecture, and he'll just say niyyah, just like we say masjid, we don't say mosque, right? But everyone understands what a masjid is. Likewise, there are certain words that every person should know what they mean in Arabic. From them is niyyah, and the plural of niyyah is niyyat. The plural of niyyah is niyyat. Hence the hadith, إنما الأعمال بالنيات. Then we have hijrah. Hijrah is migration. Again, this is from those words that everyone should know. A lot of the time, the topic of hijrah is discussed, and it's not always translated, so it's important to know what hijrah means. And we'll talk about the details of it shortly as well, inshallah. Yusibuha means to attain. To attain or to gain something. That's when the hadith كانت هجرته للدنيا يصيبها. Whoever's migration was for the worldly life, يصيبها, to gain a benefit from it. Yeah? And then ينكحها from the word nikah, which means to marry. Okay? أو امرأة ينكحها, or a woman that he wants to marry. So from the word nikah. Okay, then we move on to the general meaning of this hadith. المعنى الإجمالي, the general meaning of this hadith. This hadith is a foundational hadith in the chapter of intentions. Every single hadith in this book is a foundational principle for foundational hadith in one chapter of Islam. So I'll try to mention which chapter that is. And some of them are quite straightforward, but some of them require it to be mentioned. So this hadith is a foundational principle when it comes to intentions. And this hadith explains that actions are in need of intentions. Actions are in need of intentions. And likewise, the acceptance and the reward of the action is dependent upon the intention. And likewise, the acceptance or the reward of that action is dependent upon the intention. And inshallah, we're going to go into a bit more detail regarding which actions exactly require intention, which ones don't, which ones require them for them to be accepted, which don't, which require them not for acceptance but just for reward, and so on. And what are exceptions, what actions don't need intentions. We'll explain all of that shortly, inshallah. Now, after going through these introductory points, we now come to the main part of the explanation of the hadith, which, as you can see on the next page, page number 127. شرح جمل الحديث, explaining the sentences of hadith. It says here in your worksheets, for this hadith, before explaining its sentences, it is important to go through an introduction regarding intentions. So what I've done specifically for this hadith, which I won't always do, but because the topic of intention is such a great topic, and as Imam Shafi'i said, it's a third of knowledge and enters into 70 chapters of fiqh. Therefore, we're going to start with an introduction regarding intentions itself. What are intentions, definition of intentions, the ruling of intentions, what's the place of intention, and all these other rulings pertaining to intentions. Now, I could have added this within the hadith, but I didn't want to make it too complicated, so I've just made it a separate introduction. Once we've gone through that introduction, we will then go through the actual hadith itself, bi'idhnillah. So, the first question is, what is the linguistic definition of niyyah, of intention? The word niyyah linguistically refers to al-qasdu wal-azm, to intend something and to have determination upon that. So it means linguistically intention and determination. So for example, if a person wants to go hajj, the word hajj, the ulama say that linguistically also means qasd, to intend. Why? Because they given the definition of it in the books of fiqh, qasdu Makkah, that you intend to go to Makkah. So when you want to go for hajj, you have that determination from when you leave the house that you're going to go to Makkah. And likewise, a dua that some of the Arabs sometimes would say is nawak Allahu bi khair. Nawak Allahu bi khair. May Allah intend good for you. Okay, or may Allah want good for you. Nawak Allahu bi khair. So this is the linguistic meaning of the word. What is the technical definition of the word niyyah? It is, as Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah says. Now, if I quote Ibn Uthaymin, majority of the time it's from his explanation of the 40 hadith. So if anyone does want, a separate, I did mention some explanations a couple of lessons ago. If anybody does want one explanation to go back to read of the scholars, read Ibn Uthaymeen's, rahimahullah, read his, and it's translated into English as well. It should be something along the lines of explanation of 40 hadith by Imam Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. I did see one copy of a white cover. It's a good print. Anyways, he says within that, obviously I'm using the Arabic. So if I translate something and it's slightly different in the book, then that goes back to the translation. Anyways, he says, Al-azmu ala fi'l al-ibadati taqarruban ila Allah. Islamically, intention is to have determination upon completing an act of worship, seeking nearness to Allah. Having determination from completing an act of worship, seeking seeking closeness to Allah. So when we talk about rectifying your niyyah, a person should have a good niyyah. What does it mean? It means that you have the intention of doing the act of worship only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to get closer to him through that. Now that's like a general meaning. However, the more important question is the next question. What are the usages of the word niyyah? Now, we're giving you a general definition, but what's more important to correctly understand the word niyyah and how it is used is this next question. What are the usages of the word niyyah? Because this word niyyah can have different meanings depending on the context that it is used. And likewise, the scholars use the word niyyah with different meanings depending on the context that they are using. So the first one that you write in the left box is the meaning according to the fuqaha, according to the jurists, or the scholars of fiqh. According to the fuqaha, the jurists or the scholars of fiqh. Now the scholars of fiqh, what is fiqh? Fiqh is the practical rulings. How to pay salah, zakah, fast, hajj, buying and selling, nikah, talaq, criminal law, and so on. That's fiqh. So you can see they are busy with what? Giving a ruling upon these practical actions that you are doing. So therefore, when they use the word niyyah, they have two intentions or two usages when it comes to the word niyyah. The first, تمييز العبادات عن العادات, differentiating acts of worship from customary actions. Differentiating acts of worship from customary actions. You're going to write that in the first box at the bottom. Yeah. Differentiating acts of worship from customary actions. And the second meaning is تمييز العبادات بعضها عن بعض. Differentiating acts of worship from other acts of worship. Differentiating acts of worship from other acts of worship. تمييز العبادات بعضها عن بعض. Differentiating acts of worship from other acts of worship. And we'll explain what they mean, but the two that you should have written down is the first, تمييز العبادات عن العادات, differentiating acts of worship from customary actions or normal actions. And تمييز العبادات بعضها عن بعض, differentiating acts of worship from other acts of worship. Now what does that mean? We'll go through each of them. When we are talking about the first one, which is تمييز العبادات عن العادات, then this is differentiating acts of worship from customary actions. Meaning, you may do a certain action, but what causes that action to be an act of worship is your intention, right? For example, somebody has a shower. Somebody goes, he has a shower. Is he rewarded for that shower? No, he's just having a shower. Maybe he might get rewarded. No, actually, no. If he just goes without any intention, he's not rewarded. It's just an act, a permissible action. However, if he has a certain intention, then he could get rewarded. So if he has an intention to clean myself, because a Muslim should be clean, You get rewarded for that, inshallah. If he has the intention that it's a day of Friday, so it's sunnah to have a ghusl, he will be rewarded more for that. If he has the intention that this is a ghusl from janaba, a state of major ritual impurity, so he needs to have a ghusl, then he is rewarded for that action. Now, in all these different scenarios, the action is the same. He's having the same exact shower, same water, same shower, everything's the same. The only difference is what? His intention. And that if that intention has what? Changed the ruling of the action from a normal act that he would do, a customary act, to an act of worship. Another example is eating food. A person can eat food just because he enjoys eating food. But then, as Mu'adh radiallahu anhu used to say, أحتسب نومتي كما أحتسب قومتي. That I have an intention for my sleep just as I have an intention as for my food. Meaning, when I eat food, my intention is that this gives me energy so that I can worship Allah. Likewise, when I sleep so that I have the intention I wake up fresh and I can pray and I can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In both scenarios, if a person just eats because he is hungry or he sleeps because he is tired, right, that's an action. There's no sin upon him, but likewise there's no reward. But if a person has the intention that he's doing it so that he can give energy to worship Allah, then he will be rewarded. And this, some ulama consider it fiqh niyat. This is the fiqh of intention. Or they call it tijaratu an-niyah, the business of intentions. Why? Because it requires a person, it's like a business transaction. You could do the same action, but now a good businessman, what would he do? He's going to make that profit. So the profit a person would want, the true profit is to have that correct intention so that he is rewarded from the action that he is doing. But he's doing the exact same action. It doesn't require him to do any more specific actions, just requires him to changes intention. And that's why some of the ulama have said, عبادات أهل الغفلة عادات وعادات أهل اليقظة عبادات. So they say عبادات أهل الغفلة عادات. The worship of the people of heedlessness is customary actions. The worship of the people of heedlessness is customary actions. وعادات أهل اليقظة عبادات. And the customary actions of the people of vigilance are acts of worship. And the customary actions of the people of vigilance are acts of worship. What does that mean? عبادات أهل الغفلة عادات. The acts of worship for the people of heedlessness are normal actions. A person prays, but it's become just a habit.
Which reward do you give with the intention?
We'll get to that. The acts of worship of the heedless people are adat, normal actions. A person prays, but he's only praying because it's a habit. He's not really got intention behind it. It's like, oh, salah time, I need to do what I need to do, and he goes, right? Is he truly benefiting from the salah? Obviously, he's benefiting in the sense that the obligation is removed from him and so on, but he's not really benefiting from that salah that he should be doing because it's become like a normal act for him. But then on the other side, عادات أهل اليقظة عبادات. Those people are vigilant, those people who are awake, those people who truly understand how to correctly navigate around these different intentions and how to use them. Their normal actions are acts of worship. They're eating, they're getting rewarded for it. They're sleeping, they're getting rewarded for it. They're going to work, they're getting rewarded for it because their intention is to look after their family. Right? So that's why we should try ourselves to be from the latter group and not from the former. And that's why Ibn Mubarak rahimahullah, he says, a very powerful statement, رُبَّ عَمَلٍ صَغِيرٍ تُعَظِّمُهُ النِّيَّةِ. Maybe a small action becomes a great action due to the intention. Maybe a small action becomes a great action due to the intention. وَرُبَّ عَمَلٍ كَبِيرٍ تُصَغِّرُهُ النِّيَّةِ. And maybe a great action becomes small due to the intention. So he says maybe a small action becomes great due to the intention, and maybe a great action becomes small due to the intention. So a person could be praying Qiyamul Layl, but if his heart's not there, it's, you know, he's not really going to get that much benefit out of it. In fact, if his intention is corrupt and he's doing it to show off, he's going to gain sin rather than any reward. But then there may be another person who might do a small act of worship. Small act of worship in general. Somebody might give just like £1 in charity. Somebody may say, you know, it's not much, right? But maybe he does that out of full sincerity, wanting the pleasure of Allah, wanting to help the poor in any way, shape that he can, right? So maybe in the sight of Allah, that small action that he did, that we may consider small, is such a great action in the sight of Allah, whereas the other person who's doing a great action, in reality, in the sight of Allah, is not that great due to his intention. So this is the first. This is the first intention. The first meaning of intention, which is differentiating acts or customary actions from worships, or worship from customary actions. And that's how we get the principle. We mentioned two principles, or two statements of the ulama: ibadatu ahli al-ghaflati aadat wa aadatu ahli al-yaqazati ibadat. The worship of the people of heedlessness are customary actions, and the customary actions of the people of vigilance are acts of worship. And some ulama have said, an-niyatu tijaratu al-ulama. Niyah is the business of the scholars. No.
Who said that statement? The heedless people make them.
Ulama have said it. No, but Ibn Athim mentioned his explanation as well. He says, قال بعض أهل العلم. Some of the people of knowledge have said. No, and the second one was an-niyatu tijaratu al-ulama. The niyah is the business of the scholars. An-niyatu tijaratu al-ulama. Niyah is the business of the scholars. The second meaning of the word niyah, according to the jurists, the scholars of fiqh, تمييز العبادات بعضها عن بعض, differentiating acts of worship from other acts of worship. Now a person comes in the masjid and he prays 4 rak'at with salah, dhuhr, or isha, or asr. Now what differentiates? The niyyah, the intention. So the intention differentiates between the different acts of worship. Like the person has a ghusl, he has a shower. Okay, now an act of worship, but it could be a sunnah for Jum'ah, or it could be the obligatory ghusl when he is in a state of janaba. What differentiates between the two? The intention. The intention. No. So this is the two usages of the word according to the fuqaha. Then the second usage of the word, which is used normally in the books of Tazkiyah wa Suluk, the books of talking about the rectification of the hearts. And this is also the usage of the word according to the majority of the Salaf, the majority of the pious predecessors. When they talk about niyyah, they intend this meaning that we are going to mention now. And even some of them have even written books on it as well. Like Ibn Abi Dunya, he wrote a book called Kitabiyah, the book of intention. And that's when he wrote this book, the book of intention. What is he talking about? Is he talking about the meaning according to the fuqaha? No, he's not. He's talking about the meaning that we're going to mention now. And the meaning that we're going to mention now is تمييز المقصود بالعمل, differentiating between the objective of the action. The objective of the action. Now, what do we mean by the objective of the action? The first meaning with the fuqaha is talking about the action itself. The second meaning is basically, who are you doing the action for? Who are you doing the action for? And this is when we talk about sincerity. This is when we talk about sincerity. When we talk about niyyah and the link with the niyyah with ikhlas, sincerity, then it's the second meaning that is used. And this is the meaning, like I said, that comes many or the speech of the Salaf, and even in many ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ as well. And towards the end of today's lesson, we're going to mention some of those ahadith where the Prophet sometimes praises the intention, sometimes dispraises the intention, and so on. We'll read some of those ahadith, because that's the meaning of the word niyyah. And when we say the conditions of an act of worship to be accepted are two. The conditions for any act of worship to be accepted are two. One of them is al-mutaba'ah, following the sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ. The second is ikhlas, sincerity. And this is the meaning that we are talking about, right? So the intention, but who are you doing that intention for? That's when it comes to ikhlas. A person should do it sincerely only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in short, what are the different usages of the word niyyah? The scholars of fiqh have two usages, either to differentiate customary action from acts of worship, or to differentiate acts of worship between themselves. Or the usage according to in many of the texts and amongst the Salaf, and in the context of purifying the person's soul and heart and so on, it is who you are doing that action for, i.e. ikhlas, i.e. sincerity. The next issue on the next page is what is the ruling on the niyyah? Meaning, do we have to have intention? Do we have to have a niyyah? What's the ruling? Or is it something good to have it? Ibn Rushd, rahimahullah, in his book Bidayat al-Mujtahid. Ibn Rushd, in his book Bidayat al-Mujtahid, which is a book in comparative fiqh. It's a book in comparative fiqh, and that's the fiqh book that we studied in Medina University. In fact, the Sharia, we studied it over 4 years. In Bidayat al-Mujtahid, he mentions that all of the jurists agree and concur that niyyah, the intentions, are a condition in acts of worship. The intentions are a condition in acts of worship. There's only a small khilaf, which is regarding wudu. There's only a small khilaf regarding wudu. The Hanafi say that you don't need to pay attention for it, but that's a separate issue we'll study when we study fiqh, inshallah. But other than that, they all agree that it is a condition in acts of worship. Except for, like we said, some of the Hanafis when it comes to wudu, and also some of the Shafi'iyya, they don't call it a condition, they call it a pillar, they call it a rukn. Some of the Shafi'iyya call it a rukn instead of calling it a shart, instead of calling it a condition. Yeah? The reason for wudu is because they say it's not ibadah mahdah, it's not a pure act of worship, meaning you do wudu for salah, you don't do wudu for the act of wudu in of itself. So therefore, as long as you wash those body parts, right, it's fine, because it's like removing najasa, right? You've got impurities on your clothes. Do you need intention to take it off? You don't. Unless you got impurities, you put it in the washing basket, your woman doesn't know, she washes it. She washes it, she doesn't know there's a najasa on it. Can you pray in that thought? Can you pray in those clothes? You can. So they say likewise, wudu is similar to that, therefore it doesn't require an intention. But inshallah, we study all this when we study fiqh. Inshallah, I'm going to the khilaf and so on.
You said about the Shafi, did he say that about the same thing about wudu, but that was
No, he didn't say about wudu. Some of the Shafi'iyya, or in fact, majority of the Shafi'iyya, they separate issue, nothing to do with wudu. They don't call it a condition, they call it a pillar. They call having a niyyah for an act of worship, they call it a pillar. And the reason for that is because niyyah, a condition normally is before. Right? You do wudu before, you face the qibla before. But with niyyah, it continues as well throughout the salah. Right? You have to, if you start showing off halfway through, you don't have the intention anymore. So they call it a pillar, but that's, it's not a big issue. Right. Now we've got a question here. Obviously, by the way, we talked about acts of worship. What about normal actions? Do they require intention? What do you think?
The customary one.
Customary ones? No, they don't need intention. You go to the shops, you don't need intention. You just go, right? But if you want to get rewarded, not good. If you want to get rewarded, you have to have the intention. Right? But inshallah, we're going to get to that shortly as well. Right, the next question is, which actions do not require a niyyah? Which actions do not require a niyyah? The first, it says, at-turuk. At-turuk. What are at-turuk? At-turuk are those actions which you are commanded to leave off. Taraka means to leave off. They do not need an intention. So for example, do you have to have the intention to stay away from, I'm not listening to music? No, you just don't do it. You're not going to be sinful for that. So you don't need an intention. Likewise, the example of the najasa that I just mentioned to you. So we have been commanded to stay away from impurities. So do we have to have an intention to always stay away from them? Or if you wanted to clean, do we have to have an intention to clean it? No, because we're commanded to not have it in the first place. So if it's clean by itself, then we do not need an intention for that. So an example of this is the removal of najasa, impurity. That if it is removed without intention, it's accepted. It is accepted. The second is at-talaq. At-talaq, I'm giving a divorce if you use a clear-cut word. If a clear-cut word is used. Meaning, if a person says to his wife, you are divorced, that's clear. Right? We don't say, what's your intention? No, that's clear. It's divorce class. The divorce is made. If he was to say something which isn't clear, then we would ask him, what is your intention? If he was to say, go back to your mother's house, or something like that, which he could be intending a divorce, or he could be intending something else, only then we'll ask, okay, what was your intention? If he said my intention was a divorce, then it's a divorce. If his intention was not a divorce, then it's not a divorce. But if he clearly says, I'm divorcing you, I'm giving you one divorce, then we don't look at the intention of a person, because it's a clear word. Right? And this is about ijma'. Qarafi says, أجمعوا على أن صريح الطلاق لا يفتقر إلى نية. They have all concurred and agreed that the clear-cut talaq does not need a intention.
Who said ijma'?
Al-Qarafi. The third is ترك المحظور وفعل المباح. Leaving off impermissible actions and doing permissible actions. Leaving off impermissible actions and doing permissible actions. Right. These do not require an intention. Okay, as we explained before, for you to stay away from something which is haram, you don't need an intention. Right now, we're all staying away from, let's say no one's listening to music right now. Inshallah, no one's got hidden headphones or something. Right? So you don't need an intention for that class. You're just not listening, you got one life. Likewise, if you're doing a permissible act of worship, you're eating or anything like that, does not require an intention. However, if you want to get rewarded, then it is. In both scenarios. So we're talking about here, firstly, the acceptance of it. It doesn't require an intention. But if you're talking about a reward, then it does require an intention. So for example, let me explain. You're eating, you want reward for that, you have the correct intention. Staying away from haram, you have to have the intention. Okay, so for example, a woman's calling you for zina. At this time, you have the intention, you say no, right, you get rewarded for it then. Okay, somebody puts on music and you actively turn it off or turn away, put something else in your ear or whatever it may be, then you get rewarded because now you had the intention. Does that make sense? So that's why When it comes to acts of worship, in the intention corrects the worship or makes it something which is acceptable. As for when it comes to other actions, then it's not to do with acceptance, but it's to do with reward. And that's why we have a principle over here, which is a sub-principle when it comes to this hadith. La thawaba illa biniyah. That there is no reward except with the intention. There is no reward except with the intention. So this is general, right? Whether it's act of worship or whether it's any other action, a permissible action of staying away from haram, you won't get rewarded for any of it unless there's an intention. But when it comes to acts of worship, then for the action to be accepted in the first place, you have to have the intention. As for the other actions, then for the acceptance, there's nothing to do with the intention. But if you want to get rewarded, then you need the intention. Hopefully that makes sense, inshallah. Yeah? Okay, next question. What is the time of the niyyah? Meaning, when do you make the intention? When do you make the intention? The asl is that the intention is done at the beginning of the action. The niyyah is made at the beginning of the action. Okay, this is the asl. Whether it's an act of worship or whether it's something else. However, it is important to understand that the following issues regarding the time. The first issue is there's two types of intentions: an-niyyah al-haqiqiyyah, the actual or the true intention. Or secondly, an-niyyah al-hukmiyyah, that which takes the ruling of the niyyah, that which takes the ruling of the intention. Okay, what's the difference? The real or the actual intention is you're about to say Allahu Akbar, right? For salah, you have the intention. Okay, we don't say Allah, we're going to get to that issue anyway. But you have the intention that I'm praying for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Dhuhr salah, and Allahu Akbar. You have the intention inside you, okay? But the second type, where it's the ruling of the intention, is, let's say, just before salah, you're doing wudu. Now that time, you're doing wudu, why? Because you have the intention, I'm praying salah. But when it comes to the salah time, maybe you're thinking about something else, daydreaming, whatever the case may be. So now that you started the salah, have you got the intention? The actual intention is not there because you're thinking about something else. But we say this is an-niyyah al-hukmiyyah. It's given the ruling of the intention. Right. Then we have a question now. Is an-niyyah al-hukmiyyah, that which is considered being given the ruling of intention, is that accepted? The majority of the ulama from the Hanafiyyah and the Malikiyyah and the Hanabila, Hanafiyyah, the Malikiyyah and the Hanabila, they accept it in general. Huh?
What's the difference in the intention? When do you make the intention?
So when you make the intention, so Salah's, what time Salah? Salah's at, what time is it? 8:45. So at 8:45, Hafiz says Allahu Akbar, you have the intention to pray and you start your Salah. But the second scenario is 10 minutes before that or 5 minutes before that, you're doing wudu. Right? So you have the intention, right? I need to pray, so I need to do wudu. Salah time starts and there's a football game going on. There's a derby going on. There's derby on today, right? Somebody was saying. Right. So you're thinking about that. Hafsab says Allahu Akbar, but you've done it, but your mind's thinking about who's playing. Arsenal and Tottenham. Okay. You're thinking about Arsenal and Tottenham. At the time of Salah, are you thinking about Salah? You're thinking about football, right? So that's the second type. That's the second type. You don't have the actual intention. So now we're talking about what's the ruling on that? What's the ruling on that? Is that something which is accepted? Is your Salah then accepted or not? We said the majority of the ulama, the Hanafiyyah, the Malikiyyah, and the Hanabila, they accept it. They say it's correct. As long as it's only a small difference between the actual intention and the Salah. They do differ exactly what's that small difference, what's considered a small difference. Okay, I believe the Hanafiya, they say as long as there's not a fasil, there's not something that's happening between, like you've done wudu, then you've had a long conversation with somebody. Okay, and then the Hanabila say as long as it's considered a small amount of time, urfan, according to the customs of the people. Anyways, these are details that we don't need to go into, but generally they say that it's accepted as long as it's a small time period. Whereas the Shafi'iyya, they say no. They say no, the intention has to be at the beginning of the salah. What seems to be correct is the first opinion. That as long as the act of worship is accepted, yeah, because you have the intention. You're saying Allahu Akbar, and you're saying Subhanallah, then you're saying Surah Al-Fatiha. It shows that you intended to pray salah. But no one just does that without an intention, right? No.
What happens if your intention differs during your salah?
We're going to get to that. It's going to come. There is one exception though to this. There's one exception to this regarding the intention, having the intention in the beginning of the action, and that is fasting. And that is fasting. Fasting, you don't have to have the intention at suhoor time. If you have the intention at night, it's fine, right? Because of the difficulty having the attention at that time all the time, right? So let's say, somebody sleeps after Fajr, after Isha, and I should say he wakes up a bit late, and he wakes up after Fajr time has started, right? Right? Is he fasting or not? No, he's fasting, because when he slept, he's got the intention that I need to wake up and have suhoor and to fast. But he just woke up late. But even though his intention was made at night and not at the time of when the day of fasting started, it's accepted due to the difficulty of that. And when it comes to nafal, the supplementary or the recommended fast that we do, then the matter is a lot easier. You can have the intention anytime during the day. So let's say, and that's what happened with the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, he came home and asked Aisha radiallahu anha, is there anything to eat at home? And she said, basically, no, there isn't. So the Prophet said, it's okay, I'm fasting. So the Prophet during the day made the intention. So for example, let's say today, obviously the condition of this is that you've not done anything which will break your fast. So you've not eaten already, right? So let's say you just woken up and you've just had a busy day and it comes to about 3-4 o'clock and you've not eaten and Maghrib is in a couple of hours. So if you want to make the intention that, okay, I'll just fast for the rest of the day, that fast is accepted and it's permissible and it is accepted. Obviously the reward won't be the same as somebody who started the fast from the beginning of the day, but it's still accepted from you. Bismillah. That's the opinion of the majority of the scholars, except for the Malikiyyah. The Malikiyyah don't agree, but the majority of the scholars say that. The second issue is it's obligatory to have this intention at the beginning upon the explanation that we just gave. But what's the ruling on constantly remembering that intention during the act of worship? What's the ruling on constantly remembering that intention during the act of worship? It is mustahab, recommended. What does that mean when you say Allahu Akbar, that you constantly remember that you're praying to Allah, right? That's not obligatory. That's too difficult. All of us, we don't have that much khushu' in our salah. But it's recommended, and the more the person does it, the better it is that he constantly remembers that he's praying to Allah and standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third issue is what negates a person's intention.
For example, if someone prays, let's say they pray 4 rak'ah before Dhuhr, they intend to pray 4 rak'ah, and then they change it in the salah, they want to pray 2 rak'ah instead because they want to shorten it. Is that permissible?
The third is what negates a person's intention. There are two things. Niyat al-qata', when a person has a firm intention that he has broken that intention in some issues. So not in everything after worship, but in some acts of worship. So for example, if a person, he's praying salah, and during the salah he makes firm intention I'm not praying anymore, I'm breaking my salah. Okay? Khas is broken. As soon as he intends that, it's broken. But you can't just say, I'm breaking my salah, and then, a few seconds later, actually, I might as well just finish off. Like, it's already broken. Yes, it's broken. Likewise with Iman. First, you can't just say, yeah, I don't believe in Allah. Khas, as soon as he does that, it's kafir. Okay? Then he has to come back into Islam. Likewise in Ihram as well. All four mazahib says that person's and leave that issue with Ihram because it has a few more technical issues with it. Okay, that's the first. The second is at-taraddud fi niyyah, having a doubt in your intention. And again, in certain issues, i.e. not in every single act of worship. What does it mean by taraddud? So you're praying salah and now you think, shall I break my salah, shall I not? So you've not made the intention that I'm breaking it, you're debating. Right? Now in here there's some khilaf. There's difference of opinion. Right? So the Shafi'i and Hanabila say, yeah, the salah is broken. But then the Maliki and Hanafiya say that it's not broken. So there's khilaf. And likewise, in fasting there's some khilaf as well. The third we don't need to mention this third. Okay, these two bismillah. The fourth is where is the place of the niyyah? Where is the place of the intention? Where does the intention take place? It takes place in the heart. It takes place in the heart. Ibn Nujaym rahimahullah, he says, لم ينقل عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم التلفظ بالنية. It has not been narrated from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم that he ever said out loud the niyyah, the intention. لا في حديث صحيح ولا في ضعيف. Not in an authentic hadith, not even in a weak hadith. So it's never been narrated from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم that he would ever say the niyyah out loud. Okay? And even from the four Imams, they never did it out loud as well, except for Imam Shafi'i. It's narrated that Imam Shafi'i that he had said that you can say it. However, even that is incorrect because there's no dalil for that. And likewise, it goes against the actions of all of the Salaf. It goes against the actions of all of the Salaf. Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah, he says, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ النِّيَّةَ مَحَلُّهَا الْقَلْبِ. Know that the intention, its place is the heart. وَلَا يُنْطَقُ بِهَا إِطْلَاقًا. And it is not said ever. لأنك تتعبد لمن يعلم خائنة الأعين وما تخفي الصدور. Because you are worshipping the one who knows what is hidden within the hearts. والله علم بما في قلوب عباده. And Allah knows what is in the hearts of His slaves. ولهذا لم يرد عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And that's why it has not been narrated upon the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم. ولا عن أصحابه رضوان الله عليهم. Nor upon his companions, may Allah be pleased with them, أنهم كانوا يتلفظون بالنية, that they would say the intention out loud. ولهذا فالنطق بها سرا أو جهرا بدعة. That's why saying it out loud, or even saying it but quietly, because some of have said that you say it but quietly, that is all an innovation. ينهى عنها, that it should be warned against and prohibited. خلافا لمن قال من أهل العلم, in opposition to what some of the people of knowledge have said, إنه ينطق بها جهرا وبعضهم قال ينطق بها سرا. That some have said you say it out loud and some said you say it quietly. وعلل ذلك من أجل أن يطابق القلب اللسان. And the reason they've said this is just so your tongue corresponds to what's in the heart, like you're clear upon what you are doing. And so the Shaykh, he says, Ya subhanallah, أين رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن هذا? Where's the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم when he came to this? لو كان هذا من شرع الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم لفعله وبينه للناس. If it was from the Sharia and it's something which is legislated, he would have done it, and he would have legislated. And we could add that likewise the Sahaba radiallahu anhum would have also done it. Right, somebody may say, what about before you do Umrah, you say, oh Hajj, labbaik Allahumma Umrah, oh Allah, I'm doing Umrah. I'm here to perform Umrah or Hajj. Likewise, before Salah, we say Allahu Akbar. Is that a form of intention? You say, no, that's not you clarifying your intention. Rather, that is you saying those actions which are from the obligations of that act of worship. It's not you saying it for your intention, but it's from the acts of worship that you have to say. Now we come to another issue, which is what if my intentions are mixed with being sincere and showing off? This is, I think, your question. Now, what if your actions become mixed, whether before the salah, during, or after? What's the ruling? What's the ruling then? And this we also took in Ta'zim al-Ilm. I explained this in Ta'zim al-Ilm. There are different scenarios to this. Either firstly, it is before the action, or during the action, or after the action. Before the action, if a person has the intention to show off, then the action is not accepted. I.e., the reason he's doing the action is to show off, it's not accepted. Then we have during the action. What do we mean by during the action? Meaning you started the action to do it sincerely for Allah, but then this other intention, shaitan, comes and is now trying to change your intention. What's the ruling? Fihi tafsir. It requires an explanation. The first scenario of this is that a person fights the intention. He fights the intention. Shaitans come to him with this false and incorrect intention, so he fights shaitan. And he fights it off and he rectifies his intention, then the act of worship is correct. Then the act of worship is correct. The second is that the intention continues. The intention continues to the end of the act of worship. So he's not a fault of shaitan. Then is the act of worship accepted or not? Again, there's two scenarios. If the act of worship is that act of worship where it is all connected, then it is not accepted. Like Salah. Salah is connected, right? You can't break Salah in the middle, right? There's one act of worship, right? If the intention comes and his intention is corrupted and he starts showing off, for example, then the Salah is not accepted. The second scenario is if the act of worship has separate parts to it. For example, a person is paying his zakah, but he's paying it to 10 different poor people. To half of them, he does it sincerely for Allah. Then let's say he sees somebody with a camera taking a picture, right? So now the next 5, he's doing it to show off. What's the ruling here? Those actions where he was sincere, they're accepted, and those actions that he wasn't sincere are rejected. Okay, so we have to differentiate between those actions which are connected and those actions which have separate segments and separate parts to them. If it's connected, then it's all rejected. If it has separate parts to it, then it is those where he was sincere is accepted, and those parts where he was insincere are rejected. So inshallah that answers that question. If that is understood, now we can come back to the hadith, inshallah. After the action, it doesn't harm the action. No. So the third one is after the action, it does not harm the action itself. He's still sinful for the showing off. So let's say he's prayed salah sincerely for Allah, and then he afterwards, for whatever reason, he tells people, "Oh, pray qiyam al-layl," to show off. Then his salah at night is accepted, but he still be sinful for showing off. Some ulama have put an exception, and they say if he's using the act of worship to transgress against others, then that act of worship is also rejected. So for example, if a person has given a poor person some charity, then later on he comes and he says, "I give you this charity, so in return you have to do this to me now." He's trying to use the act of worship for his own benefit, or trying to transgress, or anything along those lines. Then some ulama say in that context, his original act of worship is also nullified. Okay, with that now we can actually start going through the actual hadith bi'idhnillah. So that was the introduction when it came to intentions. Now inshallah finish the hadith. What we're going to do inshallah, if we don't finish we're going to carry on after Isha today, inshallah, because I really want to finish the hadith today. Okay, so if you don't finish the hadith, then we'll continue. Inshallah, it shouldn't be long. Maybe 20 minutes or something after Isha, inshallah. Good adhan.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
So it says here, if these issues are understood, then we can go back to the sentences of the hadith on page 131. The text: عن أمير المؤمنين أبي حفص بن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. It is narrated on the authority of Amir al-Mu'mineen Abu Hafs Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu said, I heard a messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam say, actions are by the intention, so each man will have what he intended. The explanation of Umar radiyallahu anhu we did last week. So the actual hadith, actions are by the intentions. In the Arabic it says innama. Now innama should be translated to only. It's not there in the English translation. But the reason for that is because the word innama, it shows hasr. Hasr means exclusivity. I.e., the actions are only according to the intentions, not according to anything else. They are only according to the intentions. And this is from balagha, and it shows the importance of intentions. Then we come to the next issue, and this issue requires you to pay a bit of attention. That's why I've actually wrote out most of it, because it requires you to think. So to make it easier, just pay attention to this, okay? Then it says al-a'mal. A'mal means actions. However, this hadith, which actions is it referring to? Right? Now, if you've understood the introduction, you should understand this. There are two opinions regarding which actions this sentence is referring to, therefore changing its meaning. Depending on which actions, the meaning changes. The first is actions is referring to legislative actions, i.e. Islamic actions. Or in other words, acts of worship and other things which have been legislated. So it's specific. It's not every single action, it's just those Islamic actions. If that is the meaning, then the meaning of the sentence is verily the correctness or the acceptance of actions are by the intentions. Are by the intentions. Meaning, if you do an Islamic action, it's only accepted according to your intention. Right? And that's why in the hadith of Islam it says, La amala illa biniyyah. That there's no action except with the intention. What does that mean, there's no action? It doesn't mean that a person has not done an action, i.e. it means the action is not accepted except with a niyyah. It's a weak hadith, but it supports this meaning. The second meaning of the word action is that it's referring to every single action. It refers to every single action. If that is the case, then the meaning of the sentence is actions take place by the intentions and may be rewarded by the intentions. If you go back to the intentions, when we talked about is it a condition, you said for acts of worship it's a condition, and for other acts it's not. But for you to be rewarded, you have to have that intention, right? That's what this basically is, right? So if the meaning of the word a'mal is Islamic actions, then the meaning of the sentence is actions are only accepted due to their intentions. If the meaning is every single action, any action, then the meaning is that the actions take place according to their intentions, but the ones which are rewarded, what is by taking place is, but it's, if it's act of worship, it's accepted. If it's not act of worship, then it's not needed. and may be rewarded by the intentions, meaning if you have a good intention, then you can be rewarded even if it's not an act of worship. This basically, in simple terms, goes back to what? The explanation that we gave before, whether an intention is a condition or not. We mentioned ittifaq, the agreement of the scholars that it is. So it says here, according to this understanding, niyyah is not a condition, but a muqtamila, something which completes the action that you're doing. This completing is done by, if it is a legislative action, then it is not correct or accepted except by the niyyah. If it's a normal action, then there is no reward except by the intention. Therefore, the summary is actions are accepted or correct by the intention if they are actions of worship, or they are rewarded if they are normal actions. By the intention, if they are acts of worship or normal actions, they are rewarded. No. Okay, and over here, note all actions include actions of the heart, tongues, limbs, and also turuka, those actions that we have been commanded to leave off, as I explained previously. Right, the word niyat, we've explained this, we did a whole introduction on this. Now we come to the second part of this hadith. وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. So each man will have what he intended. Now Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah, in his explanation, he asks a question, or he proposes a question, that these two sentences, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى, actions about the intentions, and for every man is what he intended. Do they both mean the same thing? Or do they both mean two different things? Okay, so it says here, firstly, al-aslu fil kalam at-ta'sis dun at-tawkid. The asl when it comes to speech, especially in the text, is that the foundational ruling is that it is giving you a new meaning, and it's not an emphasis. Meaning, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something, the foundational ruling is that that's a new ruling that Allah is giving us. He's not just confirming or emphasizing what has come before, but rather it's a new meaning. If you can't find a new meaning, then we'd say, right, it's come for emphasis. Does that make sense? Are you sure? Right? The asl, the foundation, when it comes to the text, is that they are giving you a new meaning, and they are not repeating that which has already been mentioned. That's the foundation. So therefore, if you're using that principle, there is a difference between these two meanings, these two sentences. The first action is referring, the first sentence is referring to the action itself. And the second sentence is referring to whom the action is done for. i.e., وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. Every man will gain what he intended. So if he intended good and intended Allah, then he will get a good reward. If he intended other than Allah, then he will have punishment. And this basically goes back to what? The different usages of the word niyyah. So the first sentence is the meaning of the word niyyah according to the fuqaha, the two types that we mentioned. And the second sentence is the second meaning that we gave, which is the meaning mentioned by the Salaf and many Hadeeth, and so on. So if you've understood that, you'll understand the difference between these two sentences. The first sentence is referring to the action itself. Actions are according to their intentions, i.e., what type of action is it? Is it a customary action, act of worship? What type of act of worship is it? And so on. Whereas the second sentence, وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى, that each action is for whom a man will gain what he intended, i.e., if he intended good, he will get reward. And if he didn't, then he'll get the opposite. Right? So that's the second meaning. Who are you doing the action for? Why are you doing that action? That is the difference between the two. Bismillah, we'll stop here. We're going to continue after Salah, inshallah. So we'll continue from Hijrah, Bismillah. Those who are online, wait about 15-20 minutes, inshallah, and we'll continue after that. Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. So just before the Salah, we took the first two sentences of this hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. We explained the two meanings of the word a'mal. If the word a'mal is referring to the legislative Islamic actions, then the meaning of the hadith is that those Islamic legislative actions are only accepted according to their intentions. if the meaning, the second opinion is that if the meaning of the word a'mal is every single action, therefore the meaning of the hadith is that action take place by the intentions, but they are rewarded, but they may be rewarded according to those intentions. And then after that, we took the second sentence, وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ مَا نَوَى. Each man will have what he intended. And we said that the asl in the kalam is a ta'sis, dun al-tawqid. That in the text, the foundational ruling is that each text gives us a new ruling, a new piece of information, and it's not for emphasis. That's the asl, that's the foundational ruling. So therefore this hadith, this sentence of this hadith has a new ruling, which is that the previous hadith is for the previous sentence is referring to the action itself, whereas the second sentence is referring to who this action is done for. Then after that, we come to the next sentence of this hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ, he says, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ امْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِحُهَا فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. Thus, whose migration, i.e. hijrah, was to Allah and His Messenger, his migration is to Allah and His Messenger. But he whose migration was for some worldly thing he might gain, or for a woman he may marry, his migration is that or to that which he migrated. The next part of this hadith now, after the Prophet ﷺ, he explains the ruling of intentions, and that the intentions or actions are according to the intentions in terms of acceptance and in terms of what. The Prophet ﷺ now he gives an example of this intention either being a means for that act of worship to be accepted or for it to be rejected. An example that the Prophet ﷺ he gave is regarding hijrah, is regarding migration. Now hijrah in the Islamic text has three meanings. The first meaning is migrating from everything which Allah and His Messenger ﷺ have commanded us to migrate from. So the first meaning of the word hijrah is to migrate from everything which Allah and His Messenger have commanded us to migrate from. And this could be actions, people, times, or places. Certain actions are either sins, and the greatest of them is shirk. So we have been commanded to migrate away from shirk, i.e. completely turn away from shirk. Likewise, people, we should stay away generally from the people of shirk and the people of innovations and so on. Or times and places, i.e. times and places where and when these immoral, evil actions are taking place. So for example, if you know that there's a Christmas party going on, for example, that's a party of shirk because they have attributed to Allah a son. So therefore a Muslim should migrate, i.e. boycott and be far away from those types of places and those types of times. So this is the first meaning of the word hijrah, migration, when it comes to the text. The second meaning is migrating from Makkah to Medina. The second meaning is migrating to Makkah to Medina. And this was only during a very specific time, which is during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, from when he did hijrah until the conquest of Makkah. And that's why when the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا هجرة بعد الفتح, that there is no hijrah after fath, i.e. no hijrah after the conquest of Makkah. The Prophet ﷺ did not mean there's no hijrah at all. He meant this specific type of hijrah, which is migrating from Makkah to Medina. Now, after Makkah was conquered, there's no need to migrate, because Makkah is now a Muslim country. So there's no need for them to migrate. Those Muslims that want to stay in Makkah can stay in Makkah. And the third meaning is migrating from the lands of kufr and shirk to the lands of Islam. Migrating from the lands of kufr and shirk to the lands of Islam. This is the third meaning of hijrah, of migration in the text. And this is the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, لا تنقطع الهجرة حتى تنقطع التوبة. The hijrah will not cease to exist until repentance ceases to exist. ولا تنقطع التوبة حتى تطلع الشمس من مغربها. And repentance, the doors of repentance will not close until the sun rises from the east. I.e., until that time, hijrah is always legislated. From the time of the Prophet ﷺ until the day of judgment. Now, what's the ruling on this hijrah, on this third type? Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he explains in a very easy and simple way, right? If a person is not able to establish the symbols of his religion, i.e. the main tenets of his religion, he's not able to pray, he's not able to pray Jum'ah, he's not able to fast, he's not able to do all of the main actions of Islam, then it is obligatory upon that person to do hijrah, to migrate. As long as there's nothing preventing him. As long as there's nothing preventing him. For example, he doesn't have enough money, or he's too old. Now that person is excused. As Allah made that exception as well, in the mustada'afin, except those who are weak, from men and women. Ibn Abbas says that me and my mother were from those people. Ibn Abbas was about 9 years old at that time. The second scenario is that a person can establish his religion and there's no fear upon his religion. Then in that case, it is still recommended for him to do hijrah. It is still recommended for him to migrate. Because it's not good for a person to be living around people of kufr, disbelief, shirk, innovations, and so on. Because they can still have an effect on him. Now another question may arise, which is not in the worksheets, but you can just maybe add it on as well. What about the lands of fisq, lands of evil? The Muslim countries, but there's a lot of evil and innovations and things like that which are widespread. In that case, Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah gives a similar answer. He says, if you fear for yourself, and your family that you may fall into fitna and so on, then it is obligatory for you to migrate. If you do not have that fear, then it's not obligatory. And then he even says that if you are a person who could actually bring a change, then it might be obligatory upon you to stay. So if you're a scholar, you're a da'i, caller to Islam, and you could bring a change, then it may even be obligatory upon you to stay. So this is a very short, concise, but very clear explanation regarding the ruling of hijrah. Now, on the next page, I mentioned the exception, and I mentioned the ayah, and then you can also add the statement of Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas mentioned that he was from this exception mentioned this ayah because he was a young boy at his time, and he only had his mother with him, radiyallahu anhuma. Right, the hadith says, فَمَنْ كَانَ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Whoever's migration is for Allah and His Messenger, his migration is for Allah and His Messenger. Right, the people of language say the condition cannot be the same as the reward. Meaning, how does that make sense? The sentence. Whoever migration is to Allah and His Messenger, then his migration is to Allah and His Messenger. It's like me saying, whoever's opened the door has opened the door. Right? There's no point of that, the second part of the sentence, right? So therefore, this hadith has to have a hidden meaning behind it, which is whoever migrates, or whoever's migration was to Allah and His Messenger in his intention, then his migration is to Allah and His Messenger in terms of reward. That's the meaning of the hadith. So whoever migrates to Allah and His Messenger in terms of his intention, then he has migrated to Allah and His Messenger in terms of reward. He'll be rewarded for that. That's the meaning of the sentence. So now a person may say, okay, that part makes sense. But how does a person migrate to Allah and His Messenger? Right? Especially the Prophet who's passed away. Maybe when he was alive, we could physically go to him. How do we migrate to the Prophet ﷺ after he has passed away? And the simple answer is by clinging on to the legislation, by clinging on to the Sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ, learning it, acting upon it, calling to it, defending it, and so on. All of that comes under migrating to Allah and His Messenger ﷺ. So even though this hadith, was in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and a person may think that it's just for the migration from Makkah to Medina. No, it also has a more general meaning, which is generally a person, they cling on to the legislation and to the Sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ. But I've got a question here. Is it wrong to travel and to move to another country to make money or to get married? No. Anyone else? Depends on what.
They're going to think that they will heal, they will
Very good. Moving to another country to make money or to get married, nothing wrong with that. It's totally permissible, right? Obviously, depending on which country it is, it's not Muslim country and so on, but the asl is that nothing wrong with it. Okay, so therefore, why is it dispraised in this hadith? It's dispraised because a person was showing one thing, when in reality he was doing something else, right? He was showing the migrated from Makkah to Medina for the Messenger ﷺ, for Islam, but in reality he was doing it for something else. So it's dispraised in this hadith because the person was showing one thing, but he was keeping hidden something different. Right? So a person says he's moving to Makkah for a business opportunity, right? And somebody may say to him that, you know what, asks him why are you traveling? He said, oh, because Makkah, the salah reward is 100,000 and this. In reality, he's not going for any of that. He doesn't care about any of that. He's going just for the money. Then this hadith will apply to that type of person. Right. We have a hadith benefit, which is that this sentence, thus whose migration was to Allah and His Messenger, his migration is to Allah and His Messenger. This part of the sentence was not mentioned in the first hadith of Bukhari. So when he said the wording is slightly different, this part of the hadith was removed by Bukhari in the beginning of his book. So why was that? Why did Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah remove this part of the sentence from the first hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari? Now some ulama have said, oh, because maybe this particular wording is weak. That's not correct, because in other places he brings it. In other places, Imam Bukhari brings this. The answer the ulama have given from Shaykh Abdul Karim al-Khadir, he says, because Imam al-Bukhari has placed his hadith as the first hadith, it's like an introduction. And he doesn't want to be, he's written this hadith to remind himself and the reader of having correct intention. And he didn't want, because Imam Bukhari was very precise in the narrators, in the wording, everything, very, very precise. So he didn't want to come across, whether to himself or to others, as though he is praising himself. But you know what? This book that I'm writing is as though I'm migrating to Allah and His Messenger. So he took the good part out and he just left the bad part, which is whoever migrates to a woman or to a dunya. He left that part just so that he can remind himself not to follow that path. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon Imam al-Bukhari. Right, we have another issue, which is the hadith says his migration is to Allah and His Messenger. Wa Rasulih. What's the ruling on that? Because there's other hadith, for example, one hadith for something took place and a person said to the Prophet ﷺ, Ma sha'Allahu wa shi'ta. That this is what Allah intended and what you intended. And the Prophet ﷺ became angry. And he said, Qul ma sha'Allahu wahda. Say this is what only Allah intended. And in the hadith, Ma sha'Allahu thumma sha'a Muhammad. Or you say, this is what Allah intended and then what Muhammad intended. Don't say and, don't put us on the same level. Say and then. That, okay, so that I'm on a different level to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Showing that we shouldn't equate Allah to the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because one's a creator, one's a creation, even though the Prophet ﷺ is the best of creation. So how come in this hadith, ilallahi wa rasulih, Allah and His Messenger, why is and used? And the answer the ulama gave for this hadith is because the prohibition is regarding universal affairs. So this hadith, what Allah will and what you will, that's regarding the decree of Allah. Right? As for Islamic issues, then you can say that. Because the Prophet ﷺ is a legislator as well. And that's why in the Quran, many times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the two together. مَن يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهِ. Whoever obeys the messenger has obeyed Allah. Right? And similar to this is saying the answer, Allah wa rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Messenger know best. Right? Do we say Allah and His Messenger know best or Allah knows best? The best without a doubt is saying Allah knows best. And that's what is most famous upon the tongues of the Sahaba. However, some of the Tabi'een have also said is Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam. And what Umar said in Hadith Jibreel in the next hadith I will take. showing that if it's to do with Islamic issues, then you can say Allah and His Messenger know best. Because the Prophet ﷺ is the most knowledgeable and he is the one who is legislating. But when it comes to other issues, then it is not permissible to do so. Now, another linguistic benefit, now we need to finish inshallah, is if you look in the hadith of the two examples, migration, that was a good example. And then for worldly gain or for marrying a woman, that's the negative example, right? Focus on the wording. The hadith says, thus he whose migration was to Allah and His Messenger, his migration is to Allah and His Messenger. But in the second, but he whose migration was for some worldly thing that he may gain, or for a woman he might marry, his migration is for that which he migrated. In that which was good, in the migration to Allah and His Messenger, notice the reward that was mentioned was the exact same wording as the action that was done. But when it came to the second one, the Prophet didn't say, whoever migrates for a worldly gain or to marry a woman, then he has migrated for a worldly gain or to marry a woman. Rather, it left it general. Then his migration is for that which he migrated to. You see the difference? Allah didn't repeat the action as the reward. And the ulama say this, the reason for that is that when it was mentioned specifically, that was to show the greatness of it, to give importance of it. As for not mentioning it at all, which is the second example, it shows the lowly status of what that person had migrated for. It's like it's nothing. You know, so a person who migrated to Allah and His Messenger, migrated for the dunya or for a woman, then it's migrated for whatever he migrated to. Like just shoving it off, like it's not something which is worth mentioning. Whereas if you migrate to Allah and His Messenger, then you have migrated to Allah and His Messenger in terms of reward. So the ulama mentioned that even in, look at the wording of the Prophet ﷺ, there's a lot of wisdom behind it, and this is studied in Balagha, the different types of sentences. But the conclusion, overall benefit is that it is praising migrating to Allah and His Messenger, and it's dispraising migrating to other than it. We finished the explanation of the hadith. This is the last thing, which is some extra benefits. The first benefit, as Imam rahimahullah, he says that it shows the good way of how the Prophet ﷺ would teach the people. And the Prophet ﷺ, he was a prophet, a leader, commander, but at the same time he was also a teacher as well. And the Prophet ﷺ would have different teaching methodologies as well. And even if you look at when you study teaching and education and so on, some of you know, for those that don't know, my master's in education. In there, they study all these different teaching methods. They call them pedagogies. And you'll find they teach all these different ways of how to teach a classroom, using PowerPoints, using this, using all of that. You'll find that the foundation of all of them can be found in the Sunnah of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Right? If it came to drawing on the board, using a PowerPoint, whatever you want to use, the smart board, right? Person drew as well. Famous hadith, person drew a straight line, he said this is a straight path. Then he drew the lines on the side and he said these are the paths of shaitan. Right? They have all these other ways of teaching. Scaffolding is where you teach someone, you keep asking the student the question so that he comes to a conclusion himself, basically. Person would do that. How many times would he ask the Sahaba questions and he would want an answer from them? Hadith 14, Al-Arba'een, person took Ibn Umar by his shoulder and so on. And from the ways the Prophet would teach was giving examples. So you see, he gave the ruling, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَىٰ. Then he applied it as an example. فَمَنْ كَانَ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ till the end of the hadith. And another thing the Prophet would do as well is taqsimat, the division of different rulings. They clearly mention that if it's like this, the ruling is like this. And if it's like this, the ruling is like this. Right? So give an example of something which is good, then you also give an example of something which is bad, so that person clearly differentiates between the two. And that's very important for student knowledge, that he doesn't just give general answers. I'll give you guys the question before, right? What's the ruling of slaughtering for other than Allah? Those are asked the question before the answer. But if you've not had this question, what's the ruling on slaughtering for other than Allah? Behind the people say it's not permissible. Slaughtering, doing dhabh for other than Allah. Behind the people it's not permissible. Yeah, okay. So if a guest comes to your house and you slaughter shirk, this one you have to be precise. You have to say, look, if it's done out of worship and glorification, then it's shirk. But if it's done for permissible means, it's allowed. In fact, you get rewarded if you have the good intention that you're trying to honor the guests and so on. So you see how you have to differentiate. That's what the Prophet ﷺ would do as well. The second extra benefit is that this hadith shows the importance of intentions. Now, I was going to mention a lot of statements and stuff, but because of time, I'm not going to. You can easily fill this in. You know, we took Ta'zim al-Ilm, and I mentioned a lot of statements regarding intentions. You can add the statements of the Salaf within there where they talk about how the intention is very important. That person constantly rectifies his intention because maybe one hadith requires a number of intentions, and all those statements like that, you can add them all over here, inshallah. And I mentioned some hadith regarding them as well, which are already written. And then there's also a statement of Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah regarding the importance of having sincere intentions, which is all written and you can read it yourselves in your own time. This number 3, what are the intentions of a student of knowledge should have? So all of us are learning now. What's the intentions that we should have? There are 4 intentions, 4 main intentions that a student of knowledge should have when seeking knowledge. We mentioned this in Ta'zim al-Ilm, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. The first is to remove ignorance from yourself. The second is to remove ignorance from others. The third is to revive the religion. Revive the religion, i.e., if no one studies, Islamic knowledge is lost. And the fourth is to act upon that knowledge. The fourth is to act upon that knowledge. So the first is to remove ignorance from yourself. The second, to remove ignorance from others. The third is to revive the religion. And the fourth is to act upon that knowledge. These are 4 main principles. There are other intentions that a person could have, but they would either be secondary or they would be a branch of these 4 principles. Okay? And we explained this in detail in Ta'zim al-Ilm, so I'm not going to repeat it. There was these lines of poetry. وَنِيَّةٌ لِلْعِلْمِ وَرَفْعُ الْجَهْلِ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ فَغَيْرِهِ مِنَ النَّسَبِ. That the intention of knowledge is to remove ignorance from himself and then others from an-nasm, creation. وَبَعْدَهُ التَّحْصِينُ لِلْعُلُومِ مِنْ ضِيَاعِهَا. The second is protecting the sciences from becoming lost. وَعَمَلًا بِهِ زُكِينَ, and acting upon it. Okay, last question before we finish. How can a person overcome showing off? How can a person overcome showing off? It's very important. We're talking about intention. So we should also know that how can we remove the intention of showing off from ourselves. There are a number of ways that we're going to mention, inshallah. The first is to learn about the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To learn about who is Allah and the greatness of Allah. Because when a person does that, then he acknowledges and he realizes whom he is standing in front of. And there's no need to direct his act of worship to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by that he will be glorifying Allah and venerating Allah. The second is not to leave off actions out of fear of falling into shirk or out of fear of falling into showing off. So some people, what they do, right, is that they, let's say, about to do a good action, they're about to pray, but then they think, you know what, I'm only doing this to show off to this person. So what do? They completely leave off the action. That is also incorrect, because now you've left off acts of worship for other than Allah as well, right? Rather, what's obligatory upon a person is for him to rectify his intention and then carry on. Yeah, just stand there for a little while. Let's say you're about to pray, rectify your intention, of course, stop. Right? That's how you're going to overcome that as well. The third is making dua to Allah. Making dua to Allah that keeps you sincere. The fourth is trying to hide your actions. So praying is at night in secret, giving sadaqah in secret, and things like that. That also prevents a person from falling into showing off. And the fifth point is reminding yourself of the hereafter by visiting graves, or any other means. Because when a person realizes and he acknowledges the hereafter, then he realizes that everything in this world, any benefit, whether it's praise of the people or whatever it may be, there's no benefit to it whatsoever, nor is there any substance behind it. Rather, what is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter, khayrun wa abqa, is better, and it is eternal. And on the last page, it just mentions who this hadith is narrated by, and we already explained in our introduction, in our hadith course, who Imam al-Bukhari is and who Imam Muslim is and their books. So we can go back to that segment to find more detail regarding these two books. The only thing which I would say is that right at the end, when Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah, when he talked about Bukhari and Muslim, he said that Bukhari and Muslim are the two most authentic books to be authored. It's very good and very important that he said, and you should say that Bukhari and Muslim are the most authentic books to be authored. Why? Because the most authentic book is the Quran. But when you say a book which is authored, the Quran is not authored, it's speech of Allah. So that distinguishes between the speech of Allah and the speech of the creation. Okay? Or you could say they're the most authentic books after the book of Allah. That's also fine as well, inshallah. Okay, bismillah, we'll stop here inshallah. I know we went over salah time. I really wanted to finish this hadith. Inshallah, we'll try to stick to salah times, but sometimes we might go over. Bismillah. And I know it's difficult, but seeking knowledge requires patience, especially a book like this. There's 40 hadith. I don't want to spend like 3-4 years on this book. I know some people have spent a really long time. Now it's going to take maybe a year, because let's say at least one hadith per lesson is still 40 lessons, plus Ramadan, plus maybe holidays here and there. It's going to end up being a year, right? So that's why if you can do an extra 20 minutes here and there, I'd rather do that extra 20 minutes than all of that piling up and then being it's so long to finish the book. So it does require a lot of patience, but what would you have done in these 20 minutes anyway? Probably stood outside talking behind you, right? And if there's anything you don't understand, it will record it. Or if anybody does need to leave, let's say any day, we continue after Isha. Okay, inshallah, once the clocks go back, fast will just be after Isha. But let's say next week we go after Isha as well. And anyone needs to leave, right? They have permission to leave, no problem. It's recorded. You have permission to leave as long as you watch the recording and you catch up before the next lesson. I don't have any problem with that. Inshallah, we're going to start hadith number 2 next week. So the memorization of the hadith will be sent, inshallah, into the groups. You only have to memorize half the hadith. I'll send that into the group, inshallah.